Before we start, I want to take a minute to talk about our friends at Bitwise. Bitwise has a lot to offer to people like us who live and breathe crypto every single day. They're a crypto asset manager with $10 billion in client assets and a team of more than 100 people across the US and Europe. They've got the world's largest crypto index fund, a wide range of crypto ETFs, on-chain solutions, you name it. They also manage private alpha strategies, have SMAs for large investors, and are one of the largest institutional Ethereum staking providers. And by the way, they've been doing it all since 2017. These guys are pretty much OGs. So check out Bitwise, go to bitwiseinvestments.com and see all they've got to offer. That's bitwiseinvestments.com, or just email james@bitwiseinvestments.com and let them know that REKT brought you over. There are a million ways to access crypto. Do it with those who are all in on crypto, who care about the ecosystem, who live and breathe crypto every day. Look for Bitwise at bitwiseinvestments.com. And of course, always carefully consider the extreme risks associated with crypto.
Hey, Real Vision viewers. A quick pause to introduce you to today's sponsor, Axelar. Axelar is building the rails for the next wave of global finance. Not just crypto, but the future of how assets move, how markets connect, and how institutions plug into open systems. Think of it this way. Bitcoin brought digital gold, Ethereum brought smart contracts, but Axelar is bringing connectivity, the secure link between your favorite blockchain and traditional financial institutions, rushing to plug in. It's why top-tier firms like Dragonfly, Polychain, Coinbase Ventures, and Binance Labs are backing Axelar, and why global giants like Deutsche Bank, MasterCard, Apollo Global, and JP Morgan are already building on it. If you believe the future of finance is open, programmable, and interoperable, Axelar is the gateway. Want to digest deeper? Visit realvision.com/Axelar or follow on X at Axelar. That's AXELAR, the gateway to open finance.
Hello, guys. Welcome back to another 4th of July episode of REKT Vision. I'm here again with OSF. No holidays in Europe.
Holidays.
No holidays ever. But we're back. We're back. And the market's been, I guess, a bit mixed, I would say, this week. It really felt like maybe in the last 48 hours, we got very close to all-time highs again, and everything felt a little bit sendy. And then we've seemingly gone a little bit lower over the last few hours. How have you been, OSF? I think we have to address the elephant in the room that you've also been on a personal mission, it looks like, this week, and got a pretty leery tattoo. So this is our first conversation since said tattoo, actually. I just saw the photos of it. Are you ready to show it off to the audience yet? Or
Like a tattoo reveal.
It feels like it, right?
Yeah.
It's like showing off to your parents.
Yeah, okay, here we go. I got this yesterday. It was a very painful day, but I have a fully fledged tiger just on my chest now.
This isn't your first one either, right? Like,
it's not my first one. Yeah, this is my 4th, I think. But it's definitely the biggest one that I have for sure.
This one was the most painful, you think?
Yeah, like I did have one. The second one I got was sort of like kind of on my ribs, and that was quite bad. But it was kind of a bit more like shading on the ribs, whereas this was like obviously like quite a lot like line work and solid colors on your sternum, and it was very painful. It was definitely really painful. It was just like, I would say that I would go as far as saying this is the most painful thing I've ever done, and it took like 9 hours. The whole thing was like 9 hours, basically in one go. So,
why the tiger? I mean, your parents are originally from Bangladesh.
It's a Bengal tiger, yeah.
Yeah, of course, yeah, Bengal tigers.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, I'm just reading about them now. Awesome. Okay, so this was like your homage.
It's quite, it's quite a significant change in my appearance because it's now also visible if I just wear a shirt. I hadn't really like thought about that. I came home yesterday. I was just like, what are you like, what? And I was like, oh yeah, this is just how I look now. So,
which is actually a common summer look for you. Which is,
it is a common, yeah. I do like the 2 or 3 buttons down in the summer, but it's a significant vibe shift in my appearance.
Yeah, for
I hadn't
sure.
really considered, because if I wear a t-shirt, you can't really see it. So
It changes
yeah,
that. Are you gonna get like neck tattoos yet?
I think
Next
neck's a bit strong. I think with this, as long as like, if I ever have to I mean, I rarely have to do anything that's serious enough for me to like have to dress seriously, but sometimes you do. You never really know. So at least like with this, I'm kind of fine. But as soon as it's on the neck, it's 100% visible all the time, right? Like, I'm pretty sure if I turn up to some nice golf clubs, and I just have like a big neck tattoo, they're gonna be like, you know,
Yeah, you're kind of burning the bridges on a route back to investment bank if it all goes pear shaped, aren't you? With an
I
neck tattoo.
have zero. I literally have zero. There's zero chance. If it all goes pear shaped, there's zero chance I will ever get hired again by an investment bank. Just not just on my appearance, but like many things. So, like, yeah, you could probably, there's probably a few clips from these things they could pull up and just be like, "Oh, we can't hire someone like this who's consistently commenting on his balls and lovely summers of risk." Like, it's why is this guy always saying he's balls deep into stuff? Like, it's just unhireable now.
Sure, you're unhireable. We might as well get you a neck tat. Okay, well, big week for you, clearly on that. But I have to say the market's been pretty sideways going into this 4th of July. I think there was a lot of hope from the American contingent that this would be all-time highs America Day, and we got very close again. I think we got to just above 110K, actually, kind of where we went in early June or mid-June when we kind of approached all-time highs. It was a little bit worrying that it does kind of set up this like lower highs, lower lows pattern. Maybe that could continue for if you kind of zoom out. It kind of looks a little bit like a decreasing channel there since kind of the middle of May. So I think there's a little bit of a worry there. There's two real reasons, I guess, why we sold off. Firstly, crypto didn't necessarily love the passing of this big, beautiful bill, it seemed, which has been kind of the main thing happening in Washington. It seems like it's passed both the Senate and the House now. And there was a lot of worry about budget deficits, that this could lead to higher bond yields, and that could lead to a little bit of worry, or a little bit of wobble, let's say, in risk markets. And then secondly, there was an $8 billion Bitcoin whale that woke up this morning on the 4th of July and decided to ruin everyone's day and decided sending his assets to exchanges. How are you feeling on like your, let's say, 0 to 10 bullishness at the moment? Have you done anything over the last couple of weeks, or at least last week, or still just chilled?
Yeah, I've sort of chilled last week, not done much last week. It's yet another attempt at breaking through the Bitcoin all-time high and then, getting rejected at that resistance level. And all the commentary right now is around like old Bitcoin whales selling, and obviously have that movement of coins today from that wallet that hasn't done anything since 2011 or whatever it is. So it seems like it's going to take a lot for us to break through this level. I still think it will happen. I think we're just going to go back and, we're in this very clearly defined channel now. And when we get to that resistance level, the people who are selling still seem to want to sell. So we have to somehow absorb that supply, and then before we can break forward and push forward. But I think it's a good sign. I think it's clear to me, like with the way TradFi has been trading, and even like, we had the payrolls number, which I guess wasn't what people were hoping for in terms of the rate cut narrative. But, we sold off and then we still bounced back in terms of risk assets. So it still feels like to me the market wants to rally here. And we're just like maybe like one bad payrolls number, like bad in inverted commas, bad payrolls number away from a rally, or, one dovish FOMC away from a big rally. I don't really know what it will be, but it just feels like the market wants to rally here, is my hunch. On the crypto side, we have to get past this 110K or 9.5K resistance or whatever it is. But my view is eventually something's going to happen that's big enough where people think, oh, okay, I'm not going to sell there anymore. I'm going to let it run. And it seems like we're getting closer and closer to that, I think.
I don't know if you would agree with this, but I've found the market the most schizophrenic, at least the core crypto community that I've probably seen since kind of peak bear market. You know, it's like on the down days, everyone thinks everything is going to absolute zero. It feels like it's like, oh, everyone's going to move on to stocks. With like product market fit's not there. Like we're going to zero. And then on the good days, it's like, oh my God, we're going to tokenize $100 trillion of assets. We're going to the moon. I haven't seen this little belief in the long-term prospects for crypto in a long, long time. I don't know if you felt that too. I think just this concept of RWAs coming on chain has fundamentally challenged, I think, a lot of things in crypto and the investment thesis for a number of different things. Um, so the idea of like no revenue, no problem, again, seems to be like a bit of a worry. And then are we even trying to create currencies here? Or are we trying to create competing sort of on-chain companies, let's say, and tokens are like equities? That seems to have been like a real fundamental shift. At the same time, like because Bitcoin dominance has just stayed up and to the right pretty much this whole cycle, like there's just very little long-term belief, even in popular L1s like ETH, Sol, Sui. I would say right now probably the ETH community feels the maybe the most happy I've seen it in a number of months. But for most other L1s, it's like it is this real sense of like it's so over. And it is really surprising to me with Bitcoin where it is. Um, what do you make of that? Like on a day like today, everyone's like ready to give up. It feels like, and it just seems so crazy to me that yesterday everyone was like, "Oh my God, max risk."
I think it's not too dissimilar to what happened last summer. It's the summer chop, like don't forget for global financial markets, summer is usually a quiet time and people go off to, Nantucket or the Hamptons for the whole summer and kind of just like switch off from markets, right? But when you're a professional individual crypto trader or a trench warrior, you're still doing this shit day in, day out. But what people fail to realize is you still need global markets to make big moves for it to even affect stuff at the crypto level. And if it's not happening, then things will get stuck into this like channel where it will just kind of trade and nothing's really happening. So I think we're so used to the vol in crypto where always like something happened, like, big crash or big rally. And sometimes you do, and we've had this actually very often. We have these periods of very low volatility, like by crypto terms, low volatility, and nothing really happens. And last summer was no different. Remember, for last summer we just chopped for ages around that. What was it like the 58K to 65K range for like 2 or 3 months or something like that. And I think it was the same thing. Like every time we dropped to 57K, like Zora and Cole would be all over the timeline. It's like, oh, we're going to like 10K. And every time we went to 65K, people would be like, oh, we're going straight to 100. And then nothing really happened until, the Trump stuff took off and then we went higher again. So I think, in my opinion, this is not too dissimilar. I think there's a very clear floor to Bitcoin, which seems to be around 100K. Doesn't seem like we're going to fall meaningfully below 100K right now. Even if shit hits the fan, and shit was hitting the fan quite substantially, and we still didn't even fall much materially below 100K. And the ceiling is very clearly 110K because there are some very big sellers there. So if you're sitting there like desperately hoping for some vol, which is what seems like most of CT is, then you seem to you had this like massive diversion and bipolarness and views. But the reality is we're probably just going to chop until while these things break. I still am personally bullish for the summer. I think we're very close to breaking through this 110K level. I still believe in the lovely summer of risk. Obviously, that's like my main thesis. So I think we're close to breaking through that 110K level. And I also think even if we're 100 to 110K, remember, like lack of volatility in Bitcoin or majors tends to bring on some big moves and other stuff because people just get bored and run up other stuff. And That's when you had that big Pepe move in 2023, and then you had like a lot of meme coin stuff in 2024. So I would, a lack of volatility in Bitcoin does mean there's probably going to be other stuff out there that will start moving massively, massively higher. So that's another thing to look out for, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I hope. I've just been really shocked by it. Like it's gone beyond like we're waiting for an altcoin season to just this feeling of just like, oh, maybe we've actually missed the boat here. What is your take on this whole tokenized stocks versus um tokens here? Because I think this is now the crux of the existential crisis, it feels like, for a number of traders in this space.
Yeah.
Which is just that, on a bad day, let's say, everything's down, like, oh, what happened with Israel, Iran, or maybe what happened with the trade deal. Are you buying tokenized Nvidia stock, or are you buying Filecoin? And
yeah, that's
do you think that that's now, there is some validity to this worry that suddenly a lot of things in crypto are under threat?
It's a good question. One thing I would say is it's quite nice to have your pool of capital all in one place and being able to trade everything. I think a problem that I've had, and maybe if anyone's moving around large sums of money, is like, if you want to quickly buy stocks and you want to move it from stables into stocks, it takes you a while to off ramp and then send fiat and then send it to your broker and then have them execute it. Like, it's a slow market, and also it's not 24/7. And then also vice versa. If you have money in stocks and you want to put crypto, like, if you thankfully you don't live in the UK anymore. If you're in the UK and you have to on ramp into crypto, it's very, very difficult now. So moving around like that kind of money is difficult. Whereas, like, if you have like all the big stocks that you can now trade on Jupiter and you have a pool of stables sitting there, I think I would, like, I think if it was back in like April where I kind of felt like stocks were quite a good buy, I probably would have bought stuff like Tesla, Nvidia, all that stuff that was down a lot, because that stuff does have actually like pretty good beta to the market and similar return profiles actually to meme coins. But also, like, the Sharpe ratio of that stuff must be way higher than many coins in the last, over a 2-year time frame or something like that. So I actually think it's pretty cool. Like, I am someone who, now they're not available in the UK, I believe. They're not available in the US. They're not available in some jurisdictions. So kind of like depends where you live, obviously. But I do feel like this is a product that I will use. And also I do think this is what things will be eventually, because the beauty of crypto is it's 24/7, and it just will create this 24/7 market in stocks, which I think is good, because right now people use, weekend headline news, people use Bitcoin to express views on the market. Now you can actually trade it, do it in the stocks themselves. I think it's pretty interesting. And also, like, stocks are usually T+2 settlement. This is instant. You get the risk on straight away. Obviously, you don't own equity in it. They're derivatives, I guess. But if you're just trying to trade it,
still T+2?
I don't know. I assume so. Yeah, the actual stocks must be T+2, right?
I actually don't know. I would have assumed that then they aren't, but maybe they are.
It must
maybe
be, right?
maybe I'm wrong on that. I thought everything had moved to T. I know for fixed income, right? It moved to like T+1 or
T+1.
Yeah.
You are right.
Anyway, that was a small trading point there. Yeah, look, I think maybe it's also just break down how this conversation has happened a little bit this week. So we had, as you just said, there's now ways, particularly outside of the US, for you to buy US stocks on chain or via a centralized exchange. So we've had Robinhood made a very big announcement earlier this week at ETCC, which is one of the main Ethereum conferences in Cannes. And they have partnered with Arbitrum to build I think it's basically the foothills of their own chain, essentially. But it's a way for you to buy tokenized stocks as well as do some perp trading, particularly in Europe. And they offered tokenized OpenAI and tokenized a few other like seed stage or like pre-IPO rather stage companies as well. There's this new market for that. They got some pushback from it by OpenAI, but they're kind of sticking to their guns and saying, were still able to do this. That they're issuing what they call mirror tokens, which would only really convert to the actual stock for these pre-IPO companies in certain scenarios, including actually going to an IPO. But it does feel as though we're now starting to see that on chain. Then we saw Jupiter partner. Well, actually, it was Radium and Jupiter partner with a firm that's going to bring several major, some of the biggest tech stocks. Basically, you're able to buy them actually on chain. So that's not pre-IPO. So things like Tesla, alongside Nvidia, all like the Magnificent Seven plus extras. And then you've seen Bybit do something similar, Kraken do something similar. This was a big week for tokenized real world assets, tokenized stocks coming on chain. This is the thing. I think there is some what you just said is the exact thing. Like, I think people underestimate how much money, particularly millennials and like Gen X, have in crypto of their net worth. And the ease of now that you can buy everything, I think we may see a little bit of a retrenchment from this token proliferation that we basically saw over the since Pump Fund launched, really, right? Where, this is hundreds of thousands of coins. Like, I do think suddenly it feels as though people are probably not going to buy the long tail of coins as much. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing for crypto, but I do think that it has kind of crystallized that a lot of altcoins are never going to come back for a lot of people here, particularly those without revenue, without product market fit, that were just kind of held up at a high valuation. And there was just a question about whether they were actually like, why it was ever trading there. Well, if you can buy a company that is generating revenue, and particularly on those bad days, like if the market's dying or it's ripping and it's often macro driven, I do think that people will look to trade these things more than they trade some of these altcoins. So that to me does point to maybe Bitcoin dominance. I don't know if it's Bitcoin dominance, because I don't know how long that tail is and what percentage of the market really is still left in it. But I do think that trend of, let's say, the coins outside of the top 50 will probably continue to drift away from the coins inside of the top 50.
This is the thing, because you've had this whole internet capital markets narrative, right? And now it's like, well, if you can actually trade private stocks on chain, what's the point in internet capital markets? And with the current form of Solana internet capital, or whatever it is, or that Believe app, to me, and I could be wrong, it seems like 75% of them are all rugs or just like extortion projects. And that's because there's no real rules in terms of securities offerings and that kind of stuff when they do the stuff. But obviously, a stock that trades on chain still has to go through SEC regulation, and still, it's a security. So the only difference is you can trade it on chain. So at least like the stuff that you're trading aren't. I shouldn't say they're not bad projects, because you can get bad stocks that can still go to zero, but at least they're not like going to be instant pump and dumps and that kind of stuff. So that's one thing I would say.
I like.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I do like the pre-IPO stuff. I actually think that is a really interesting new frontier here, because I think there's a lot of people that have wanted to make that market very liquid for a long time. And it does suddenly feel like crypto might be the best way to do it. We've already seen a little bit of a clash this week about where the incentives to this sort of stuff might get broken down. So like Robinhood at this presentation earlier this week said, hey, you're going to be able to buy tokenized OpenAI stock. It's in this mirror form, but basically they said, it's going to be give returns very similar to that when they IPO. OpenAI had to come out midweek and basically say, look, this isn't our stock. We have to pre-approve anyone who does this transfer. Don't listen to Robinhood. Robinhood since came back on that and said, no, it's not exactly a stock. We do have custody of them, but it's only a mirror token. It's only actually a transfer when, if they IPO or in certain other scenarios. For OpenAI, they probably don't want their stock trading. It really depends on the performance, right? There's a lot of sensitivity around these sort of the valuations for these companies pre an IPO, right? Like imagine WeWork ahead of an IPO if they had done this, and you have SoftBank telling everyone it's at 10 billion, and all the bankers telling everyone it's at 10 billion, it's trading it on Robinhood pre-IPO at like 500 million. It's going to be, which I don't have a problem with. I actually think that leads to like more efficient markets, which I like. But I do think there's going to be this like clash between, do you want your equity to be put into these sort of markets from the companies? It's definitely not a slam dunk.
Yeah.
But there will be a lot of incentive, I think, from VCs or a lot of VCs to kind of liquidate maybe part of their risk by these sort of entities as well. So if I'm sitting there at A16Z, I'm probably thinking this could be a nice way to exit half the portfolio to LPs and then just raise more cash, right?
What was the deal with the OpenAI stuff then? I'm not sure I like fully understood. When they launched OpenAI and SpaceX, my assumption was that they had like agreements with them for the IP, I guess, or something like that, and they had figured out what like some value, like maybe they launched at the valuation of the last round or something like that. That's what I assumed it was, but it seems like it's just. Is it just like so it's not actual equity? It's just a ticker that like derives from it. Like, what actually is it, and why did OpenAI refute it? Like, what is it that you're trading?
Well, that's the thing. You're not taking it's basically an equity forward, I would call it. It's not.
Yeah.
It's almost a derivative. You're not. You
It's a
can't
derivative, basically.
Yeah, you can't own the stock at this stage. And OpenAI is right. Like if shares transfer pre-IPO, they normally have to get some sort of signature from the company to be able to do that, because there's a lot of sensitivity about who owns the company pre an IPO. And again, like making sure that the shares don't get into loose hands and drive down the valuation. Like this has been a heavily protected part of the market for investment banking fees and companies alike, right? Like they definitely want to be able to control the narrative going into their own IPO, and this could potentially take some of that power away from them. But it seemingly they're going to take custody of them in a vehicle, so they don't go anywhere, and then they would convert to being actual equity at a sale or an IPO or some other like more downward scenarios, like if they went bankrupt or something like that. So that's where it's kind of at, which I think is the best. I think that's as far as you're going to get with this. Like I don't think you can. There's no way you could actually have them actually trading the shares. So the two like interesting ones are going to be things like SpaceX, OpenAI. There was a few other big ones. I mean, Stripe obviously is famously one of the biggest companies pre-IPO in Silicon Valley, and there's going to be a few others I think that might come to market here. So, and it doesn't have to have the company's approval. It just has to have one shareholder. It has to have someone like A16Z or one of the other major, not just crypto investment firms, but broader tech investment firms to say, hey, we're going to liquidate part of our portfolio here, and you can get access to a bunch of pretty cool things, it feels like. So I do think this is going to have traction. And the Robinhood presentation is worth watching. It was actually very good, and it very much gives the sense that they're kind of all in. Just a few years after, the whole everyone hates Robinhood after they delisted GameStop and then they delisted Solana, and
it wasn't really their fault, though, was it? Like they had to SEC.
Well, I'm just saying they didn't have a lot of friends, I would say, in the community a couple of years ago, and then they really have gone kind of more all in with
what
this.
Do you very iconic presentation, would you not say? And with a lovely backdrop. Yeah, he's dressed immaculately. I have to say, I definitely had a lot of envy / like big man crush on Vlad Tenev there. I thought it was very.
He wears a suit well. He
wears very suave. Well. Yeah,
it's in very Cannes. Suave. Yeah, you kind of get you get that sort of
The little neck scarf thing. Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah, he had a wardrobe going into it, or had a good stylist. It feels like going into it. Apparently, the event was like boiling hot as well. So there's a lot of
He's not even. He's not even. There's not one drop of sweat on him. It's incredible, right? And he's
wow,
and he's
really
active. He's active. He's like, drawing on the whiteboard and everything. It's like it's not like he's just sitting down.
Is there a link between you getting the manly tattoo and watching that as a presentation? You just thought, wow, I need to up my game here when there are men like that in the world.
I would be lying if I didn't imagine myself one day in Cannes with like a a linen jacket like himself and maybe 3 buttons down on my shirt talking about
just the head of the poking out at
yeah.
at the...
with a blackboard, just drawing random things. Yeah, that's like a life goal for me, actually.
We can make it happen. We can make it happen. Maybe that's where the REKT annual shareholder meeting should take place at the Rothschild Villa in the south of France somewhere.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, we should definitely do that. That is proper company goals. And he was smart, like you have to we'll have to improve your presentation skills, like your ability to write on a whiteboard that well. I feel like that also takes quite a lot of skill to be able to be that.
Yeah, he's rehearsed this many times, hasn't he? It's just too smooth.
Too perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah, I also agree. There was a lot of man crushing from the crypto community after that. He did a very good job, and he's now become a bit of an icon, I think, in the crypto community as being our new fearless leader, who's going to take us into even deeper TradFi trenches, let's say, for crypto. But yeah, that's been the main story, I would say, this week. If before it was like stablecoins and treasury companies, this has accelerated. It's mainly outside of the US, but the story and the narrative around it has accelerated a lot. I think people were expecting that more to be a second half of the year story, and perhaps not this early in the second half. Like, I think they thought we needed to wait for tokenization legislation coming out of Washington before people would try this, but it feels as though we're going to try it in Europe as the sandbox for everything. And when the US is ready, it'll just port straight over to the US. So it does feel like we're going to see a lot of this now. And yeah, I don't know. Bitcoin dominance is just kind of stayed up where it is, about 56% so far. I think ETH and Solana kind of kept pace, at least with Bitcoin. Oh wow! Well, we're getting a little bit of a weak day actually today. Wow, like things are really not liking this Bitcoin while selling, are they? Going right back. Bit of a liquid weekend. Everything's selling off.
You've got to think, right, when something like that happens, like that movement of Bitcoin, that the market's going lower. Like, I didn't do any trades, but I was off my desk, but I kind of would have probably taken a short in Bitcoin there for a scalp kind of thing. But that like things are going to sell off, and you just think, because this is so controlled by all these like old school whales, surely they can all be like, okay, let's all go short. Harry, you go move your 1 bill of Bitcoin, and then like Billy and Bob, you just start selling your Bitcoin, and then we all just like make loads of money, and then we'll find a floor and then bid it all up again. Like, surely that's what they're doing, right? Like,
of course, it's like you would never, ever in a million years wake up after or however many years, over a decade of owning Bitcoin, and not choose the 4th of July is not the day that you would choose unless you're trying to cause the market to really sell off. So I think obviously it's just gamesmanship, right? Like, this is clearly the worst day of the year possibly to sell whatever it is, $8 billion.
I mean,
Bitcoin.
whoever this is, this isn't their only Bitcoin, right? Like, they must own Bitcoin and other wallets, etc. But I saw I kind of lost it now, but I was reading something about someone speculating on how it was the CIA, and then like all these other like crazy theories. But it's an interesting thought, because there's people out there who own billions of dollars of Bitcoin, and we don't really know who they are. Like, they could just be random whales in the middle of nowhere, but it could also be like institutional type stuff that we're not aware of. So it's kind of, I don't know if we'll ever get to the bottom of it, but I find it pretty interesting. And when we sit here talking about like Bitcoin dominance and the M2 chart and, markets and all this kind of stuff. We're like, it's going to move, it's going to go down. At the end of the day, like one person with that set of private keys can can influence the entire thing, but like based on their actions, which may even not be even selling or buying Bitcoin, it might just be transferring Bitcoin out of one wallet to another. So, if when you see that stuff, if you have a sort of like existential crisis, which is like, I don't even know if everything that I talk about, I think, is even relevant anymore, and when that much can be controlled by just like a handful of people, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it feels just a bit like you kind of know what's going on these sort of weekends. Having been around crypto for now enough time, you kind of know when games are being played. And I would probably guess that by Sunday, we'll just kind of be where we were at the start of the weekend, just because people know they can play games over a long weekend and no one's going to get in their way. So
yeah,
definitely quite one of those this week. There was a bit of more of an extension of the Bitcoin treasury stuff. I think the main thing that happened was a bit more of a resurgence in the ETH narrative, let's say, around this. So you saw Tom, who is a pretty prominent market analyst, big calls over the years on MicroStrategy or Strategy Now and Bitcoin, and works for Fundstrat, is now going to be I don't know if it's the CEO or the chairman of an ETH strategy, an ETH accumulation company, let's call it like that, called Bitmine, which originally was a Bitcoin mining company, but then has since shifted into this. And he's got a lot of airtime, basically, over the last week or so, and seemingly this has been like a 30x since it's announced, which we've seen a few of these recently, but the ETH ones had disappointed until now. And then suddenly there's this belief that this could be the one with enough momentum to kind of do the MicroStrategy or strategy trade here for ETH. And it's not just been that, right? Like, this is some of these crypto related stocks, Soul Strategies, Circle, Hood, like this is where people are paying attention. And there's no doubt in my mind it's sucking attention away as well for the rest of crypto. But what did you make of this? Because there's two of these now. There's obviously Tom Lee's, and then there's Joe Lubin's, which I think we announced kind of SBET back in the day, gaming. So there's two of them, Sharpnet Gaming, and then now this Tom Lee one. Do you think these could be interesting plays, either of those?
I mean, some top down, something that quite clearly is happening right now is companies are buying Bitcoin as treasury assets. And that is the start of just generally lots of people in the world owning some form of Bitcoin as part of their balance sheet, part of their portfolio, part of their treasury, whatever it is. I think Ethereum co-founders have realized that there's a chance to put ETH in that category and have that also as an asset that everyone just generally owns as part of their balance sheet. And so I think that's the reason behind SharpLink. That's the reason behind what Tom Lee is doing as well, behind Bitmine. It kind of like doesn't feel like that organic to me. It's not like, Michael Saylor has been doing this for years and years and years, and now everyone sort of buys into it. ETH I think, is a very different asset to Bitcoin. But you have to think it's positive for ETH because at the end of the day, it's creating demand for it, which is going to be held on a balance sheet as sort of like a long-term hold type thing, and it's taking supply off the market. And if at some point ETH does well, and I still think it will do, we've spoken about ETH as a favored long of ours over the next few weeks and months. I think if ETH outperforms Bitcoin, if you get ETH BTC rising from where it is now, and we get like a 50% or 100% outperformance, then I think this stuff it suddenly makes these guys look like geniuses, right? Because then it's like, oh, well, everyone was buying Bitcoin in the balance sheet. These guys created these ETH vehicles, and now ETH has like doubled that of Bitcoin in terms of performance. And then it will create this, and the ETH ETF is out there as well. And eventually we'll have like ETH ETF with yield. So I think it will then create, it's sort of like sowing the seeds of like, okay, shit, now everyone also not only do we need to own Bitcoin, but we also have to own ETH. And that I think is what they're trying to set up here, which could be interesting. But my view is in order for that to happen, we need to have this ETH outperformance versus Bitcoin. We need ETH BTC to go back to like 0.04 area for them.
They could
this
happen simultaneously, though, don't you think? Potentially,
it could. Yeah, it could. I guess what I'm trying to say is like I think these things alone in isolation aren't probably enough to move the needle, but these things, once the seeds are sown, if we start to see that natural outperformance, then this stuff is like really exciting, I think, because you'll see it will just, the narrative of it will change. You know, remember if you read the FT and you read all the comments on it, and it's just like, oh, another, Joe Lubin doing another like crypto pump or whatever. I think like if this is view it as a trade, if this trade works out for Joe Lubin and Tom Lee in the next 6 months, let's say, then they're going to be called geniuses, and everyone's going to want to do it. So that's kind of like how I'm viewing it, really.
Do you think?
I actually think it will work. I think it will work.
Do you think they're better longs than ETH? I think that's the real question here. I mean, obviously, Tom Lee's this company, Bitmine, has gone from trading at, before the announcement, 5 to now trading at 135. So the trade is probably over there. But SBET is trading at 12.
Yeah, it's down from, it went to as high as 80, right? Or something like that.
Right. And it's only trading at like some sort of smaller premium to its holdings. It's not like something crazy compared to the others. Like, do you think that these, at least a part of the long, are more interesting than altcoins, firstly? And then maybe even, do you think they are more interesting than ETH itself?
I think I would view it like MicroStrategy. It's just a levered version of ETH.
Right.
I don't know if they're behaving like that right now because they are new and you had this like initial pump and then like initial sell off, and it may take time for them to marinate a bit. But I would view it as like a levered version of ETH. So is it a better long than ETH? I actually think SharpLink could be. SharpLink is what, 80% off its highs and up 100% or maybe 150% off where it was prior to the announcement. So you could view that as maybe like a better long than ETH because it's quite convex. If ETH goes to, let's say, 4K from here, you would think SharpLink is through its all-time highs, right? Which is more than a 2x return, more than a, whatever it is, 75% return. So, and maybe its downside is capped because it's not that high off its levels prior to the ETH announcement. So that looks interesting. I think I'd probably favor that over Bitmine. But again, like I'm just saying that based on recent price action more than like the actual fundamentals.
Yeah, that's the one I was looking at too. I was looking at SharpLink going like, maybe this is the trade here. Like maybe this is even better than, like, if ETH does go to 4K here.
That's through all-time highs, right? It's like it's at 100 plus. You would think.
Is that, yeah? So that's like a very convex trade, in my opinion.
Yeah. And people, I guess it got sold down because people thought.
Well, because they haven't really announced a more longer-term line of capital here. It feels as though it's just like the short-term deal, and then that subscription for everyone to sell their shares. Like it looked like everyone had sold, was willing to sell, even though that wasn't necessarily the case. But there is this concept that there's a feeling that all the investors just want to exit, and you know those sort of trades where like they fundamentally look sound, and you're like, why does no one else see the value of this versus the other? Like, I don't think you have to be a genius to realize that this trades at a lower premium to pretty much every single other one of these companies. But I feel like there may be there may be a reason behind it, you know?
Yeah.
And like maybe that's because everyone knows that there's like a ton to go. There's a ton of shares to sell, but maybe a piece of news changes that. Like maybe they announce a long-term capital line where they're going to raise like 1 billion, 2 billion, and continue to buy ETH. I think that would be probably the most bullish piece of news that we would hear.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, that's the one thing I was looking at this week. Basically, just is
that is it. That is interesting.
is
I do
S better
think
along than ETH, because I like ETH and I
you,
like some
you know what they need? They need a sharp link on chain for us to trade. Tokenized sharp link.
Or a tiger tattoo and a can presentation. You know.
Yes.
One
of those two things, and then it's up only.
If you're listening, let's make it happen. Me and OSF can help support that as hosts of the event potentially.
All right, let's do some questions. I think we might be a bit light in questions today because it's 4th of July, obviously. But before we get onto that, quick shout out to Arch Public. If you guys want to take out the emotions out of trading, check out their algorithmic trading platform. There's a free tier subscription you guys can access if you head over to realvision.com/arch. Again, I feel like every week we're saying the same thing where Bitcoin hits that all-time high level, then drops back down again and is kind of like chopping. And this platform will make you money in a chop because all it does is it buys lows and sells highs. So I would highly recommend checking it out. And I've been using it and making money using it. So I think it's a no-brainer, at least on the free tier. Okay, first question from Turbo Goose on the Real Vision website. I still don't understand. If I buy one mirror share of OpenAI from Robinhood for, say, 50, then what's happening is that Robinhood are committing to buy a real share for that $50 in the case of an IPO. So it's an IOU in a completely speculative price. Is that your understanding of how that works?
Well, you don't know how many shares necessarily are going to be at the IPO. So I think actually it corresponds to the percentage ownership of the current shares. So I wouldn't necessarily view it as like you need to guess the share price, if that's what your question is. I do think it will correspond to your percentage ownership. Pro rata, that'll be the valuation that you get, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Do you think they need to? Can they just launch this without? Is there any like IP considerations to be had here, or can they just launch it without the IP? Sorry,
what do you mean by IP consideration?
As in, like, can you just say, "Here's OpenAI forwards," and we've done this without the permission of OpenAI?
I think they might face a lawsuit. I would be very, very unsurprised if one of these companies says, "Hey, we don't agree with this, and it needs to be legally challenged." That being said, like OpenAI did challenge them, and Robinhood stuck to their guns. So, and I would like to see them stick to their guns, but it does feel like some companies not going to be happy with their valuation, right? Some companies going to come to market on this sort of platform, or an investor's going to put their shares on this sort of platform, and they're going to be like, "Hey, like this is wildly off what our bankers think. We want to see you because we didn't want this out of there." And that feels like where the lawsuit's going to happen. It may happen with OpenAI even. Who knows?
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Okay, next one, comment from Jedi Monk on YouTube. Love the tattoo. Appreciate that. Omega Vega says microneedling and minoxidil for me, which I then Googled up, and apparently it's something to treat hair loss. I've actually had this type of hair like my entire life, and I've had local spots of alopecia many times. So,
you mean baldness?
Yeah, but my hair's always been like this, like since I was like 13. So I don't think I'm losing my hair, because when it grows long, it's actually like relatively long and thick. But when it's this short, it doesn't grow in like normal patches. So it's just.
Isn't he talking about things that were similarly as painful, or?
I just Googled this exact term, and it's something to do with hair loss. So I assume it's because my hair looks quite patchy when it's short. So.
Oh wow, he's just comfy for it, right? Yeah. I've been and many colleagues at work used to say that Ovi was going bald for a long time, because he does have random patches on his head that are just like, they're just not there, particularly when he has long hair. But never has happened. So I think
The Ovi is balding narrative has been going for at least
since I've
15
known you.
yeah, at least 15 plus years now, and
Yeah.
I'm still not bald, so I appreciate it. Another question from Turbo. Now that OSF looks like an incredibly capable warrior, will this lead to a REKT arms race face tattoo next week, Mando? As far as I'm aware, are you still down for if REKT guy hits a 4.2 ETH floor, are you still in for the arse tattoo, which is something that you subscribed to a few years ago?
Famously, if REKT guy does hit a certain level, to be clear, OSF was not meant to cut his hair until that happened either, and OSF has cut his hair several times since then. So a little bit of flexibility, but if it does reach 4.2 ETH floor, I'll get the butt tat for everyone. Face tat, I don't know. I don't know if I'm ready to burn the bridges about never having a job ever again in my life.
I mean, there's one thing about like any form of tattoo, but a face tattoo, I feel like is another level of like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what the term for it is.
Not appropriate in the workplace. Let's put it that way.
We actually had I don't even remember this would you rather from back on the trading floor that I coined, but it was, would you rather have a number one, like hash one permanently tattooed on your forehead, and the number one, or would you rather have eyebrows under your eyes, but you're not allowed to shave them? They must be displayed at all times.
Eyebrows.
So basically everyone thinks you're like a freak, or they think you're just like a complete, idiot with like number one tattooed on your forehead.
I think number one. I think and
just rock it.
I can't imagine cheek brows.
But at least I think the answer is eyebrows, because at least if you have eyebrows on your eye, people are like, like I kind of feel sorry for him. It's obviously some condition. But if you have the number one tattooed on your forehead, people are like, man, that guy's a tool. Yeah.
Cheek brows. Are you able to explain it at any point?
Yeah, you're allowed to explain it. I think
it's funnier if you can't. I think it's funnier if you're just like, oh no, I like it. I really. Oh, these brows? Yeah. No, I have like that on purpose. They're stuck on brows.
That does make it worse, quite substantially, I think.
That's a choice. That's been my choice. Okay. You went to Turkey for a hair transplant? Yeah. Slightly rogue, the one I went for. Cheek brows.
I don't know why I find that so funny. Right, on that note, I think we better wrap it up. That's everyone for tuning in. That was the July 4th USA Independence Day edition of REKT Vision. Remember to check out Arch Public, realvision.com/Arch, and we will be back next week at the usual time, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 p.m. British Summer Time. Before we head off, quick question for you guys. Do you think July will be an explosive month for crypto? Please let us know in the comments. And we will see you guys next week. Have a great weekend.
Bye, guys.
Hey, Real Vision viewers. A quick pause to introduce you to today's sponsor, Axelar. Axelar is building the rails for the next wave of global finance. Not just crypto, but the future of how assets move, how markets connect, and how institutions plug into open systems. Think of it this way. Bitcoin brought digital gold, Ethereum brought smart contracts, but Axelar is bringing connectivity, the secure link between your favorite blockchain and traditional financial institutions, rushing to plug in. It's why top-tier firms like Dragonfly, Polychain, Coinbase Ventures, and Binance Labs are backing Axelar, and why global giants like Deutsche Bank, MasterCard, Apollo Global, and JP Morgan are already building on it. If you believe the future of finance is open, programmable, and interoperable, Axelar is the gateway. Want to digest deeper? visit realvision.com/Axelar or follow on X at Axelar. That's AXELAR, the gateway to open finance.